cordial group, so I'm going to relax over my coat and do my tie and relax a little bit. Basically, I want to thank three people. I want to thank Eve as the director of the Monsanto Gallery. I want to thank Roger for helping install the show. I want to thank Ann Bowen, board member here at Lander. Ann was at my exhibit at North Carolina State University approximately 1 year ago, and at the Gregg Museum in Raleigh. And after the show, she said, "You know, you really need to come to Greenwood." So here we are in Greenwood. And Ann is basically the reason I'm here. It was her invitation to come here. And I met Ann through Joyce Rush, who is a former dean at Lander. And I think these ladies have Greenwood in their hearts and minds to bring me here to go through this kind of trouble. So it is a gift from them that we're here right now for you to enjoy. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take you on a little tour of these rugs so you can understand what's going on. And basically I'm going to start with what I think is the most obvious thing, which is the color. And it's red. As you notice, all the rugs are red. I get asked quite a bit, why are they red? The answer is quite simple. In the desert, rugs are dark. Now this is a fundamental physical reason for the color. Christians would tell you it's the blood of Christ. Other people would tell you Turks would tell you it's blood, period. There's a lot of thoughts connected with it. But the fact of the matter is, what I've noticed in my 40 years of studying these rugs, is they're dark. And in the desert, it's very cold at night. So during the day when it's very sunny, dark colors absorb heat. So in the tents at night, the heat continues to stay in the rugs and warms the tent for the rest of the night. Bedouin rugs are black. Baluchi nomadic rugs in Afghanistan are dark, dark brown. Turkmen rugs, which are by far the largest number of desert rugs, are red. The important thing is that they're dark, and dark goes beyond color. And these particular rugs, dark is very important because it's the absence of light. And in these particular rugs, the absence of light means the feminine properties of the world. In other words, the yin and yang. And the light on all these rugs is much less proportionally than the dark. But the light is the male force. It's the yang. Absence of light, which is the receptive force, is the female. These are part of the Chinese interpretation of the meaning of the colors and the symbols of these rugs. Turkmen rugs include roughly all 7 of the world's major religions, but they kind of start with Chinese. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over here. This particular symbol here. Now, over there on the wall is this symbol on a framed picture. It's called a yin-yang symbol. And it's from the Chinese Book of Changes, which Confucius wrote. And it basically represents an octagon. And these octagons are the 8 elemental forces in nature. The primary four earth, wind, fire, and air. I'm sorry. Earth, fire, air, and water. The other 4 are mountain, lake, cloud, and wind. These basically represent the 8 elemental forces in nature. The final 2 are light and dark, which is male and female. Now, stay with me here, and I'm going to run through this quickly. This is called a major goal. This is called a minor goal. The minor goal is the female version of the major goal. The major goal is the male force. It is the Chinese great circle of life. In Turkmen, goal means lake. So it is a lake toponym. Also, these are birds. The first 3 Turkmen tribes 4,000 years ago had the animal totem of hunting birds: the eagle, the falcon, and the sparrow. So this is known as a goosh goal, which is a bird goal. Here's the story. Here's what happens. Turkmen weavers in the 9th century were kind of taken over by Sufi masters called Nabadashian Sufi masters. That is the mystical section of Islam. These Sufi masters basically, as all Sufis do, instructed their people to take whatever bits of all religions they like and make up their own religion out of them. So these symbols are basically made up of bits and pieces of the world's 7 major religions infused into one, and then given animal totem names to hide them from the scrutiny of fundamentalist Muslim groups next to them. So many of these designs, for instance here, which is the female version of this is the major gold, this is the minor gold. This is really a Greek cruciform cross. But in Turkmen nomenclature, it's called a frog, Yorbada. This is obviously not a frog, but it's part of the Turkmen method of obscuring the true meanings of all their designs using animal totems, which is very important in their world. So here we have a frog, minor ghoul, and incidentally, this would be a ghoul, this would be a ghoul. A ghoul is G-U-L, a ghoul is G-O-L. Turkmen spelling would be G-O with 2 dots and an L. Ghoul, referring to rugs, means lake. So this is also a reference to the agriculture of the Turkmens. So you have a yin and yang symbol, you have the 4-quartered Christian symbol, which predates Christianity. The 4-partition world of the Turkmen is extremely important. So here you have 4 partitions. You have the Chinese earth, air, fire, water. You have the animal totem of the goose gold. All of these are infused into one gold. And they're all connected by this blue line, which goes through that. So all things are connected, all things are in balance. If you're in a Turkmen tent at night and the lights are low, all you really see is the white. The red goes away. So the red becomes absent. It's gone. It's negative, feminine. So what this means is the Turkmen as a group worship the male force, which is light, the sun, the giver of life. And they also worship stars. The Zoroastrian worship of fire predates Islam and Christianity. So star fire or star crosses were thousands of years old. This would be a star cross. Basically how it works is this. Inside a Turkmen tent, which is the base floor perimeter is an octagon. There's a hole in the top. It's called a tuynuk or a flue. So here's how it works. One of these is a Turkmen tent in 2 dimensions. But if you bring it forward, put it on the ground and make it 3 dimensions, this is a Turkmen encampment. And in these 3 dimensions, the same special meaning of this octagon is encased in the tent itself. In the circular round tent with 8 sides and a round top with a hole in it, when smoke went out, very much like the American Indian cone tent, but in this case octagonal, circular. They would look through the tuynuk and see the stars. For thousands of years, these people have been worshiping stars. So what this really is a star pole or a star cross. And here's how they live. They would look through the tuynuk and flue, and they noticed 7 heavenly orbs: the sun, the moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. Those became the 7 days of the week: Sunday, Moon Day, Saturn Day, and so forth. They also became the 7 Turkmen gods, the 7 saints. These powers that came down through these heavenly orbs would flow into the tuynuk or the flue, and the Turkmens believed that they got power from this. So essentially, let me just add one little thing. These here would reflect the sun during the day and night as it passed around the yearly migration of the Turkmen tribe. So this is basically a diorama, or basically a pictograph of the Turkmen life. another important thing to notice is they have the male, they have the female. They have the major ghoul, the minor ghoul, major primus, and minor primus. These inside here are stars. These inside here are stars. These are stars. There's a huge association between star fire and sun worshiping and star poles. What they believed is the 7 planets, what would you say, circled the pole star, and the pole star was the North Star, and they believed that beneficial energy comes down from the North Star, is enhanced by the 7 orbs, and brought into the 10th. So here's what they did. Every one of these little bags in this room, like this bag, those 2 bags, the bag on the back wall, they all had various functions, which was storage of food, storage of grain, storage of material possessions. And so around the central flue inside the tent, they hung 7 of these bags, each one with a different use. One could have been a hunting bag. The other could have been a grain bag. So the idea was, as the energy comes down from the pole star, circles around the planets, the sun and the moon, it increases in power. When it comes to the hole in the ceiling, they hung 7 of these torba bags around the flue, each one with a different meaning, each one receiving a different blessing from the power and energies of the stars. Which means if you wanted a good crop, if you wanted good hunting, let's see. I think the best way to describe it is to show you this one right here. Right across here is a Sagdik-Itzi line. This little line of arrows coming across usually occurs in each of their bags. There's another one here. There's another one here. Essentially, what that did was, once the energy came in, the Sagdik-Itzi line was at the top opening of the bag. So whatever the bag was used for, that would receive blessings for the star energy. And so basically they covered birth, they covered crops. I think I have over here, if you all will follow me over here, I'll show you the most important bag inside the toilet. This is a kajebe. This was the bridal litter on a camel. This was essentially designed to take energy to bless the bride and to have a successful consummation of marriage, which meant the baby would be healthy. This here is an ashik torah. This blessed their life, and this refers to a game. Ashik means sheep knuckles. If you take the metatarsal from a goat, and you put, they're shaped like an hourglass. And if you put one in front of a bigger one, in front of the big one, this is the design you get. It's called an ashik torah. This is where they stored the goat bones of a game they've been playing for 4,000 years. So essentially, here's the Sitchin Isik line. It takes the energy from the stars. This was hung around the interior of the tent, absorbed the positive energy from the stars, and it would enhance their life, their daily life. And here's an interesting thing. It's something I can use this piece to point out. These little pieces here and here and here, they look like the number 3 or 3 lines upside down. Those basically are Dagalik amulets. Almost every one of these pieces hung on a bridal camel, and every one of these pieces was designed to deflect evil spells from the bride. So here's how it works. These tic-tac-toe crosses here are called it-tai-pan. These little diamonds are called akgozi. So essentially, as the energy came in from the pole stars, these 7 pieces surrounding the pole stars, and by the way, those pieces over there have 7 borders. So each border is related to each level of the day, each of the Turkmen 7 saints, each of the 7 layers of the Turkmen universe. 3 of them were in earth, 3 of them were heaven, and 1 was spiritual. Here's what happens. These amulets here were Christian. This is the Armenian letter E, which is short for He, which is the Armenian word for God Almighty. These are hidden Christian symbols that were used as protective amulets to defray evil spells against the bride. There was a lot of jealousy. You were talking about a tribe of maybe 250,000 people. So when the chief chose one girl to be his wife, there was a lot of stuff going on. So since the dawn of time, these pieces were designed to protect the bride. One of the ways was Christian amulets, which is amuletic, apotropaic properties. The other would be taking the star power. First, this line takes it in, and then these lines, by repetitive use, increase the star power and keep it going around. So inside the flue, you have 7 pieces taking the star power, moving it through the tent, protecting the bride. It's all about protecting the bride, protecting birth. The Turkmen worship 3 things. They worship birth, they worship death, they worship marriage. That was it. So every piece in here, in one way or another, is designed to promote those things, especially the bride. The pieces changed function as they came off the bridal camel and went into the yurt, that's the Russian word, which is incorrect. It's actually an oi. The name changed. So a kajibilik on the bridal camel, when it's put across the oi inside the tent, it became an animal trapping, and it became known as a gapilik. So the name changed as the function changed as the pieces moved, which makes it a little complicated to follow these things. Here's another one. This little piece here is called the Aina Torba. These little squares, Aina is Turkmen for mirror. So this was a bridal bag. This is what she used to put her mirrors, her personal items, and so forth. When they take an Aina, which means mirror, and put it inside a square, they increase its power. Basically, its power to reflect evil. So with the 7 borders in here, in the Aina mirror, the mirror reflects evil spells as it comes into the bride. It pushes them away, reflects them back to the person who's sending them. So this is a bridal Aina Torba. Here's another interesting fact. These little pyramids here going across and these are called Gilim Barmak. Gilim Barmak means bridal fingers. Here's how they work. These are like an electrical fence. The point of the vertex pushes out energy and protects anything that's inside the bag, which is transferred to protection of the bride. So Gilim Barmak, bridal fingers. This is Kashil Gochak. Kashil Gochak is an ancient Hindu fertility blessing for birth. So every piece you're looking at here is basically the same, and they're all thousands of years old. These designs came thousands of years ago, and they're all designed to either benefit the bride, the newborn baby, or the health and life of the tribe. Every piece in here. That's the meaning of the symbols. The color goes back to the Chinese, the male and the female. This is the bridal piece, Kajibilik. This is the Aina Torba. Those are soldats and ogazis. Now let's go over here. I'm going to show you something else. Another important part of this recognition of meaning of the symbols is this piece called the kachli. Kachli is the ancient Armenian word for cross. This was the inner enclosure of the tent door. The meaning of these symbols, again, basically designed to take the energy from the stars and circulate it, move it throughout the tent, and put it into the areas where it needed to be to benefit them. The interesting part about it, like the Ittapan. Ittapan translates into Turkmen dog tracks. These kochanak, these are reverse kochanaks here, fertility symbols. These here are called Keli Akshiks. Here's an Akshik goat pattern with goat knuckles. This is a tree of life. So essentially, once again, the whole thing is designed to take all these powers moving through their tent and bless themselves. The interesting part about this is the Christian cross. What this really is the 4-quarter principle or the 4-partition principle. It goes back thousands of years before Christianity. Even though it's called a Hachli, these designs predate Christianity by thousands of years. These designs predate Islam by thousands of years. It truly is remarkable that the meaning of these designs, you have to think about the Christian cross. My thought was, well, it's Christian. The fact of the matter is, it predates Christianity by millennia. So this is the cross, and this basically cuts the universe into levels. The 4 levels are the first 4 levels of the earth. This is a 7 partition level on the way to the cosmos, the cosmology. Here are your Sagdan Ichi arrows, taking the energy in, shooting the arrow up. Here are your goat knuckles. Here are your Hindu birth blessings. Here is your Gyak order. And what happens is this. When most coats worn, cheftans worn Afghanistan and Persia are stripes. The idea is when good and evil come, they hit that coat at the same time. The different colors take the energy and wash it off the coat and away from the guy. So the coat is protective. These things work on the same basis. This multi-stripe barber pole here called a Gyak stripe is designed to take energy, negative and good, and keep the good and remove the negative. So basically these things are really devices that work for these people. Now, one of the largest devices is the tent band, the golan. This golan is 48 feet long, and it surrounds the tent. It holds the tent together because each of the octagons is a trellis system. It's separate, they put them together, then they wrap around it. But what it really does is it spiritually encloses the people inside and protects them from any evil that can take place. Like when someone's sick, they bring in a shaman. The shaman goes around the tent for 3 days, and he focuses on the tent band, giving blessings to the sick person inside the tent. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've read document incidents of this actually really working. The shaman goes into this huge trance. He goes into coma for a day and a half. 3 days later, the kid gets up and comes out of the tent. I have documented evidence of this actually working. The name is the Blue Wolf, and the Blue Wolf is called Jenny. And the shaman uses Jenny in connection with these tent band strips. So, I don't know. To me, the most interesting part of the study is seeing things like that and realizing that if people believe strongly enough in something, it works. Whether I approve or anyone else approves, it's meaningless. These people have been in these deserts for thousands of years, and for them, they work. Do they work? I wish I knew, but it certainly is exciting watching it and seeing how they do it. And it's amazing to me that this complex system of symbols infuses all these different areas like fire worship, star worship, sun worship, and so forth. There are those who suggest that in the case of the Baluchi nomadic rugs in Afghanistan, in the 19th century, they were called constellation rugs. When you go into their tent at night, put a candle on, all you see is star galaxies and constellations. There are those who say that these were their road maps home to get to the planet that they eventually came from, that they know this, and that they're captured in these thousands of years old. It's just amazing. The most amazing part of all is how incredibly well these pieces are woven. They're sitting in deserts. There's no wood. All they have is their sheep, their goats, their camels, and they can produce these things. They also had no written language. So the fact of the matter is, these are their books. These are their written language, except it's nonverbal, and they're designed to work on humans by not becoming conscious or not being intellectual. They go straight through the eyes into the central nervous system and actually work. They manipulate people. And one of the interesting things about it is these were some of the fiercest nomads that ever lived. They could cut your throat with a surgical precision in 5 seconds, and yet they can weave these rugs, which to me is beyond explanation. How can anyone that ferocious, that vicious, turn around and create things like this, which can last for 1,000 years. It's where the Europeans learned how to make cut pile velvet in the 16th century. How can this be? How can these people do this? I don't know. It's one of the most fascinating parts about it. And quite frankly, I'll give you one more example. Do you see that tall piece hanging on the back wall? Do you see how those white octagons in the center appear to be kind of hanging in space? Well, they are hanging in space. Those are star clusters. These people wove what they saw. When they looked through the roof and saw the heavens, they saw a connection between themselves. They had ropes that they could place through the tunic or the flute, where they could literally drive their little tents through the cosmos. Or they could manipulate the ropes to cure a disease or to increase. These were like steering devices for star tents. It really was remarkable. And I could go on for hours about how this is, but I'm not going to do that to you. The most important thing is this. In all my research, in hundreds and even thousands of hours of research that I've done on these things, the thing that fascinates me the most is how they want to hide the origins of these symbols. How they take these complex star crosses and so forth and call them after mouse tracks, dog tracks, and so forth. And the whole thing is to obscure the origins of the symbols and the designs. So you have layer upon layer upon layer in a group that has no, which these books are their codexes. They represent everything that's happened to them. I'll give you one more example here. This here would be a tribe. Each one of these is a male-female unit in the tribe. This is beyond the Chinese explanation. This goes beyond it. The idea is that the males and the females have to be in balance in order to exist. This is one of the most ferocious people that ever lived on this planet. Could kill you so fast it's not even funny. All of their life was in warfare. The death they worship was valiant death in battle. And yet, the information they're getting here is the female and the male have to be in balance in order to coexist. There has to be a perfect symmetry. This is a nonverbal codex of instructions for the tribe. It goes back thousands of years, thousands of years. They understand it. This, again, here is the sun as it goes around the tribal unit. This is where the power from the stars come in, and in the front, you see the foreground. If you took this and placed it flat, raise the octagons up in the tents, this would be the four fields or the foregrounds in front of their encampment. These are dioramas of their life existence. They're their books. Call it what you want, pictograph, doesn't really matter. This is a non-verbal set of information that covers, God only knows how many different subjects simultaneously infused into a single design. So you can imagine how many thousands of years it took to create this. They don't sit around and think about it. It's non-intellectual. They are not aesthetic. There's no consciousness involved. If you ask a Turkmen woman, are those designs in your head? She will go, no, they're in my heart. And all women weave these rugs in the nomadic world. Rugs are woven by women. So they have the power of their fertility, because men are usually worthless in the nomadic world. They can fight, but they can't have babies. So they're really not necessary. So the woman holds the power in these tribes, and by doing that, she has the privilege of weaving. The men buy the wool, they process the wool, they do the dye colors and so forth. Every one of these products in here is a combination of a dye master, a wool master, and a master weaver. And the master weaver is a woman. Therefore, the fertility cult. And these tribes, the woman has the power to order the man out of the tent. In other words, to divorce him. They have tremendous power. And the fertility cult is embedded in these rugs. The birth system is embedded into these rugs. There are a lot of theories that these octagons, in addition to being Chinese and the lake and the animal totem and the fire totem and the water totem, there are also unending birth canals where you just have baby after baby after baby going back. So as you go back to the center of these, it's just unending birth canals. So they worship fertility in these. And the amazing part about it is they worship everything that's connected with their world. So these are their books. And these tribes were wiped out by the Russian army in the 1880s. There will be no more. So we happen to live close enough to the end of these weaving groups to see these rugs. It's just a trick of time that we happen to live close enough to the end. Mechanized Russian army. Every piece is here because of the Russian army in 1880. They would have never sold these pieces. They were not made for sale. But when you see your grandson getting killed, you have to have weapons and so forth. So it's no different in 1880 than it was in 1970 in Afghanistan. The very end of the pieces we got out of Afghanistan, we used to buy bullets to fight the Russians. Once again, Russians. So here we have the product of the end of the 19th century Russian activity in Central Asia. Catherine the Great had a fantasy of restoring the Byzantine Empire in Central Asia, like Istanbul was when it was Constantinople. It was a Byzantine Empire. She had a fantasy in doing that, but the Turkmen armies destroyed the Russian army for over 200 years. Finally, the train went through the Merv Oasis, Akhal Oasis, mechanized Russian army went in. And they made a point of destroying these people. They used Cossack cavalry to do it. They killed every man, woman, and baby in several of these groups. So these groups have gone. What you're seeing is the last individual specimens of a weaving tradition that took place for 4,000 or 5,000 years. Another interesting thing in my research, most of it was in Moscow, and the research I did was in Ashgabat and Turkmenistan, but the Russian research, in the Cherokee Indians and the Sioux Indians, there are hundreds of Turkic loanwords. In the 18th century, when an American Cherokee chief went to visit George III, he was referred to as Ata, which is father in Turkic language. In the Maya culture, there are hundreds of Turkic loanwords. There's Turkmen poetry, Turkmen dancing in the Maya culture. So evidently this group was around a long time ago. Also, another important point is the Turkmen were Aryans. They were the first Aryans to come in to Central Asia from the Altai mountain region, bearing language and animal husbandry. They were Aryans. So it's a fascinating group. They interbred for 1,000 years and became interbred with Mongols, Persians, and so forth. Anyway, we have any questions? I could go on, but this is as good a time as any to stop.
How many people would live in one tent?
In 1840, a Russian intelligence officer named Major Mareyev went to the Caspian area and documented the Turkmen tribes. He came up with 6 major Turkmen tribes. The Tekes at that time were the most prevalent, and he counted 50,000 kibitz, which is the Russian word for tent. 50,000 tents with about 5 people per tent is 250,000 people in one tribe.
What was the type of wool that's used in these drugs?
Essentially, they were bringing in animal husbandry. They breeded their sheep, they bred their sheep to make the wool necessary for the climate. If it was desert, they used spiky wool. They would find a sheep that spent 3 months in a cold climate, 3 months in a moderate climate, and another sheep that spent 6 months in a hot climate, and they would breed them to come up with the wool for the rug that was in the hot climate. They would reverse that breeding process to come up with the higher elevations. We're using basically a fat tail sheep. Basically, a fat tail sheep refers to a sheep that has very soft, curly wool. It's very oily, and they had a tail that would often weigh 40 pounds. So I've seen etchings from 19th century Turkmenistan of these sheep that would have little wheelbarrows behind them to carry the tail so they wouldn't go on the dirt, get all dirty. It's incredible. Fat-tailed sheep, that's why they're called fat-tailed. They have, but they had goats, they had camels, they had very little serography except in the Yomud groups in Persian Turkestan, and then the Chinese Turkestan groups in Tashkent and Khotan that had silk culture. But there's a couple of these pieces with silk in it, but it was very rare.
How many husbands would a woman have?
If she got rid of one, she could have another. I think the idea was more like how many wives could a chief have, and that was unlimited. So if you're the chief in a tribe that's 250,000 people, your power is beyond belief. And what happened was a lot of these young girls would weave. Basically, the young woman would weave a dowry set of 6 to 8 pieces for the new husband. But she would only really have time to weave one. The rest of the women in her family wove the other 6 or 7 pieces. The one piece she wove was called a kalik, and it went on the wedding camel on the breast. And it was reversed. It's a U-shaped piece called a kalik. It went into the bridal tent after the wedding procession, became a gabalik, but it was a kajibalik or a kalik on the camel, and it was displayed in reverse so people could see the skill of the weave. And so 6 to 8 pieces, quite often in a big tribe in the middle 19th century, she was chosen as a bride by the chief based on her skill of weaving. So here's what happens. In this group of 250,000 people, any chance you ever had, your family ever had, your cousins, your friends, of being someone, of having status, depended on how well the young girl wove, and the chief would choose her based on her ability to weave. And she would go into the tent with the other wives, and that was his wealth. That was his money. So the woman, for instance, this piece behind you is a bridal mat. This piece was woven for after the wedding, during the reception. That's the piece she sat on when she welcomed her girlfriends, family members, and so forth. That's called a bridal mat. And the amazing part about this bridal mat is it's the only one in existence. It's cross-lined with this blue, like the big one over there. This is probably the only one I've ever seen in 40-some-odd years of collecting, where a small bridal mat is cross-lined with blue. By the way, blue was the color reserved for the devil. Also, in Persian liturgy, blue is the color of heaven. So, also those pieces back there, the strips, those are late 18th century tent band strips from the Sadiq group, one of the most remote Turkmen groups in the world. There are basically 6 Turkmen groups. If you look at a modern flag of Turkmenistan, there are 5. Each tribe had its own goal. Here, this is a Teke goal with the bird. This is a Gush goal. Only the Teke tribe could use that goal. Back over there is the Salor goal from the Merv Oasis. Only the Salor tribe. To the right is the Chador goal. Each tribe had its own trademark. It's called a tamgras. And no one else could use it unless one tribe defeated the other tribe, then they had the right to take their trademark. So in the modern flag of Turkmenistan, there are 5 goals. The Teke, the Sadiq, the Salir, the Yomud, and the Ersari.
Wow, to weave.
Yeah, when you consider the fact that when these pieces were woven, they were not quite as sedentary as they were towards the late 1800s. They only had a couple hours a day between movement setup. What would happen in like a big tribe with the Tekes? At 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd get up, get packed, and move. So when the chief wakes up at 10 in the morning, he throws open his tent enclosure, and it's just a beautiful desert. And he has his breakfast and moves to the next, they're all set up for him. So it goes in there. During that period of movement, setting up and taking down, they had about 2 hours where they could weave. So it would take some time to weave these pieces.
How has the white yarn remained so white?
Well, essentially the white yarn is sheep's wool without any dye. So it stays, basically it's like a blonde hair.
This one over here, the white, really stands out.
Yeah, some whites are whiter than others. Now, there are rugs, for instance, come on back here, let me show you this one here. There are rugs in the Pinde Oasis in southern Turkmenistan where the Sadiq tribe used cotton. And this is bleached cotton, so this is the whitest of all.
Cotton.
Yeah, they worship the color white, number 1. White indicates rank, it indicates the sacred status of the person who possesses it. So all new wedding tents were white. It's called an ak boy. And here you have white, but you also have this rose color is nomadic silk, which is the rarest of all in Turkmen weaving, this nomadic process silk.
What were the major dyes?
There's two dyes, madder and indigo. Those were the basic dyes, and natural wool with no dye whatsoever. And the feature of both of those dyes, which is amazing, is that they didn't run. They're both stable dyes. So I always got a big kick out of the United States having red, blue, and white in the flag. Because when they say those are the colors that don't run, they're not kidding. Those colors don't run. and Betsy, what's her name? She knew that. She was, but nowadays people have forgotten all about it, which is fascinating to me.
What they traded for the cotton and the silk?
The cotton would have to come in from certain areas, and the silk would have to come in from certain areas, either Tashkent or Persian Turkestan.
Because
And the cotton came from the Sadiq oasis in the southern Turkmenistan. Also, the Russians introduced mass cotton in 1880 to the oasis weaving groups along the Amu Darya River in southern Turkmenistan.
Because they didn't grow cotton and they didn't.
Generally speaking, cotton was not really introduced in bulk until Russian traders bought there about 1885. So a lot of this cotton here is nomadic cotton, grown in the back, somebody's tent. It's pretty rare stuff.
And to clean these rugs, would they just beat them with a broom, and if
No.
they came across
No, you would never beat rugs. Basically, the way these rugs are cleaned is basically cold water.
Well,
Yeah,
when they eventually
rugs cannot take mechanical agitation. Can't shake them, can't beat them. And basically, they weren't clean. The idea with almost any oil rug is not to clean it, rather than clean it.
How have you kept the moths out of the wool?
A close inspection, observation.
I mean,
You
don't
just have
put
to
any
know.
mouth-proofing
No.
chemicals on.
No, I basically keep them in storage and lockdown storage, and I know how to inspect them and make sure there's no problem like that. There's no moth damage in any of these rugs.
How did you get involved in collecting?
I bought my first antique tekken when I was 18. I grew up in a military family. All my parents, grandparents on both sides of the family all had rugs. They all had Oriental commands, all the men. So I grew up with rugs. I was 18 years old. I got my first apartment. I went and bought a rug. I didn't think there was anything unusual about it.
Grew up with it.
Everyone did it.
Excuse me. Okay.
Yeah, and another aspect of these weaves is when the wool was processed, the women gathered, the men sheared the wool, brought it to the women. The women either combed it or carded it, depending on whether they wanted spiky stand-up wool or soft, fluffy wool. And then they get a big bunch of it, they pull it down like this and rub it on their thigh. It's called drop spindle technique. Then they would put a little stone on the end and gather it, twist the stone. So this is all non-spinning wheel process wool. This is all drop spindle technique. Yeah, and another important thing is in 1996 they created a written language for the Turkmen people in Ashgabat. The reason I wrote this glossary is because the written language is a modern language, so it has words like supermarket, computer, tank, truck, but none of the old Turkic rug terms. So this glossary I wrote took 13 hours of research, 1,300 hours of internet research, and about 500 hours of editing. It's on its 7th edit right now. Basically is to return the original Turkic rug terms to the written language. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. And glad you were here. Come back again. Look at your rugs.
Thank you very much.
Well,